Welcome to dual coding mind mapping with the working plant. You're going to need 2 pieces of paper and a pen or pencil. On your first piece of paper, you need to copy down exactly what you see on the screen. So at the moment we have the working plant and we have a plant there. We're going to go step by step through different branches for you to copy down what you see on the screen whilst listening to the explanation. I'll continue to explain what we're going to do as we go through. So our first branch is all about photosynthesis. And here you need to know the products and the reactants of photosynthesis and how they are used, how much of them there are, and how much is produced. So here we can see that we have carbon dioxide shown by the little puff of carbon dioxide cloud. We have water, H2O, we have sunlight, we have O2, and then we've got a little diagram of the O2, and we have sugar cubes representing glucose. So we know that in photosynthesis, which is the process in which plants make their own food, we have carbon dioxide plus water using the energy from the sun to make oxygen and glucose. You also need to know the formula equation. So we have CO2 for carbon dioxide, H2O for water, O2 for oxygen, and C6H12O6 for glucose. You also need to know how many of each of these you need. And you can see here the balanced formula equation is 6 lots of CO2 plus 6 lots of water gives you 6 lots of oxygen and 1 lot of glucose, C6H12O6. Now you also need to know what are the reactants and what are the products. The reactants are the things we're reacting together, so that would be carbon dioxide and water. The products are the things that are made from this chemical equation, or this chemical reaction, and that is oxygen and glucose. Now if sunlight is used, and that goes above the arrow as depicted in the top line, sunlight is used for energy, so that energy is required to make photosynthesis work. It's a chemical reaction and it requires energy in order for it to actually react together. I'd like you to pause the video, re-explain your diagram using your finger to trace over your diagram, re-explain it to somebody else or to yourself, then restart the video. The next branch is looking at leaf adaptations, and the leaves have to be adapted in order to cope with photosynthesis, as this is where photosynthesis takes place, in the chloroplasts in the leaves. Now the chloroplasts are these wonderful little subcellular structure which allow the photosynthesis to take place. It allows chemical reactions to take place in the leaf. We then have chlorophyll, which is in the chloroplast as well, and that gives the plant its green pigment. And that's how we know that photosynthesis has occurred, because of this green pigment. Now leaves are very broad, they're very wide, just like solar panels, and this allows them to capture as much energy from the sun as it possibly can. They're also made up of lots of layers, so it allows lots of different bits to happen. Now we know we've got respiration, we've also got gas exchange. We've got the exchanging of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And for that we need particular things on the leaf in order to let this oxygen and carbon dioxide move in and out of the leaf. So on the underside of the leaf we have stomata, and these are tiny little holes where this exchanging of gases can take place. Now we have guard cells which open and close the stomata. So when the stomata is open, carbon dioxide and oxygen are free to move in and out as much as they like. When the stomata are closed, this cannot happen. The reason the stomata may close is because of water loss. Now plants in a very dry climate, if they don't get very much water, they need to reserve as much water as possible. And so they close the stomata as much as possible, but they also may have fewer stomata on the underside of the leaf. A plant in a very humid condition where there's lots of water will have lots of stomata, which will remain open most of the time to allow water loss, because there's lots of water that it can get from various places. I'd like you to stop the video, retrace your diagrams and explain to yourself or to somebody else. Then when you have finished, restart the video. Here we are talking about factors affecting photosynthesis. There are many different factors which can affect the rate of photosynthesis. So temperature, sunlight, water and carbon dioxide. Now temperature If we have an increase in temperature, we have an increase in the rate of photosynthesis until we hit the optimal temperature. And that's a particular temperature in which photosynthesis can work at its maximum level, its best level, optimum temperature. However, if the temperature increases and exceeds that optimum level, the rate of photosynthesis suddenly decreases. And this is because the temperatures are too hot and the plant cannot function, the chemical reaction cannot take place. And so the rate of photosynthesis starts to decrease the higher the temperature goes. Sunlight is another one that has an optimal temperature. Light intensity instead of sunlight, to be fair, that's what we should have used, light intensity. So light intensity, as you increase light intensity, you increase the rate of photosynthesis, but only to a certain point. Once you hit that optimal light intensity or amount of light, it then plateaus. So instead of dropping and starting to decrease, it plateaus. It gets to a point where it can't go any further, but it doesn't decrease. This is the same for carbon dioxide, the same process as light intensity. As we increase the amount of carbon dioxide present, we increase the rate of photosynthesis, but up to its optimal temperature, optimal amount of carbon dioxide. It then plateaus off again. And obviously we need water, and it's the same concept. There's a certain amount of water that the plant needs to photosynthesize, anything below or above that, and we're going to get a decrease in photosynthesis. I'd like you to pause the video here, trace over the video with your finger, explaining to yourself or to somebody else, and then restart the video. This is our last section for the working plant, and here we're talking about transpiration and translocation. Now, transpiration is all about the movement of water through what's called the xylem, and this only moves in one direction, from the roots, in the root hair cells, where the water is taken in from the soil via osmosis, and it travels up the plant in one direction to the leaves where it is needed for photosynthesis. Then we have translocation, and this is the movement of glucose. So once photosynthesis has occurred and we've got a store of starch and we have a store of glucose, what we can then do is move it around the plant to where it's needed in order for the plant to grow, repair, etc. So it can move up or down, and it moves in a tube called the phloem. So you have the xylem, which transports water in one direction, but the phloem translocates sugar into it, and it can move in different directions. Now, root hair cell and osmosis. Obviously, osmosis is the movement of water from a high concentration to a low concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. So the root hair cells have a semi-permeable membrane which allow this to happen. But we also have active transport, and this is for different minerals that we have from the soil which the plant takes in. Now, active transport is the same process as osmosis, but it's moving a different molecule, so something like sugar, for example, or a different mineral which is needed across that membrane. In order to do that, we need energy. And so active transport is used because that is where we get that energy from in order to move it from one place to another through that membrane. I'd like you to pause the video, tracing with your finger over your diagram, re-explain this to yourself or to somebody else, and then restart the video. What I'd now like you to do is read the mind map which we have created. There's quite a lot of information on here, diagrams and words or scientific language which you need to know. So take 5 minutes looking at this mind map which we've created, trying to remember as much as possible. If you need to, re-explain it to yourself, each of the branches at a time. What I'd then like you to do after those 5 minutes is to turn this sheet over so you can't see it, and then on your plain sheet, try from memory to draw and write down as much of the information as you possibly can remember. Once you've finished that as much as you can, compare it to the previous one and see how much you have recalled. This is a really good way of recalling that information which you need to remember. If you do this multiple times, you're more likely to remember the information that you need for the exam. You've been watching Dual Coding Mind Mapping the Working Plant. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for another unit.